Hey everyone, Ruby Panda here, and I'm finally back with another video. And this is probably going to be the closest thing that we're going to get to Ruby Panda tier list, which is going to be me reviewing someone else's tier list. In this case we have Rabbit here. I think a lot of people will know this tier list. And for this video I'm just going to be focusing on the ToA rankings, because otherwise it's going to be a really long video. If this video does well, we might focus on Dark Zone and Broken Frontline and all the other ones at a bit of a later date. But for now, what I've gone ahead to do, or did, is I made a copy of it, and I've changed some of the assumptions here and the prerequisites. Most notably that I have increased the amount of investment on each sinner, and this is simply because of some of the tests that I've done on ToA are much closer to this than this to what Rabbit has assumed. And I have updated the tiers themselves with the specific thresholds sinners need to pass in order to go into certain tiers. Now, I know that maybe some of you may be a bit concerned that I'm assuming 999, but basically the assumption that I'm going for here is that if a sinner is doing, let's say 1.5 million more than another sinner at 9999, well, I'm also just going to be assuming that that sinner does a similar difference, or relative difference to say, at 777. That's not a 7. There you go. That's basically the assumption I'm going to be working off here. But yeah, basically 999 with the occasional 10 as well, just because of that's what I could find to test with. But that's basically going to be the assumption here. These numbers here are the overall contribution, or the overall, I say, overall base contribution. When I say base damage and I say base contribution, what I basically mean is that a sinner's base damage is, if you just put down that sinner and you have guild buffs active, how much does that sinner do? I also don't do any animation cancelling, just for like consistency. It's definitely I think a mistake that I'm not doing it, but that's what I went with. So yeah, these numbers are going to be the tiers. And then we have something else I want to talk about, and that is going to be the base damage versus the base amp. So we have base damage. This is one of the sets that I'm going to be doing without any animation cancelling, and we have base amp. Now, in order for me to measure the amplification, it's a bit tricky, right? Because if I amp something 10%, and that sinner usually has a base damage of 1.5 million, well, that increase is going to be higher than if I were amping a 1.0 million unit. There's something to consider here. I usually measured the amp on a really high base damage unit. In most cases it was Zoya, and in a lot of cases it was Luvia as well on the magic side, but that's basically something to consider. So maybe this tier list could be slightly favoring amplification. But yeah, last thing, I'm going to be completely disregarding demon shield stacking, because demon shield stacking just breaks this, right? Like 2 million base contribution, like demon's base contribution is insane, right? It's like it puts them like 15 tiers above anyone else. So if we're going to be completely disregarding that, if you have demon shield stack, I mean, obviously that is going to be the best option for you. Alright, I think that about does it then, and we can actually start talking about the units now. Now, that actually puts Demon in an interesting position, because I think Rabbit actually got it right, that if he's used outside of the shield stacking composition, he's pretty bad. Ovo is a very interesting case, because Ovo deals no personal damage at all. Her base damage, I'm going to shorten that to BD. It's basically 0, but her base amp is actually fairly potent. She will buff, I think, about, it was like 750k. All things considered, about 750k you can really be expecting from her. However, you may notice that this puts her in the in around like the below average tier actually, and that's actually completely true. Like if you're using Ovo and you're using something like, let's say, Aerial on your team, then Ovo is actually terrible. Also, I should say this number is without the crit rate from her ultimate. If you want to go ahead and just like go for an even 1 million, you can do that. It doesn't change the fact that the point I'm trying to make here is that if you're using something like Aerial, Ovo becomes incredibly bad for ToA usually. I shouldn't say bad, but less optimal. Ovo's strength lies in the ability to remove Ariel or another healer from the equation completely and replace her with a DPS, right? So basically, if I have a DPS instead of the Ariel now, thanks to Ovo, then I can effectively add the DPS's damage to Ovo's damage, like her effective damage, right? So let's say that I'm adding in something like a... I'm going to do Priscilla, because she's not too rare and she's a fairly stable, I think 120 million, which would put Ovo on around the 2 million effective contribution overall, and that definitely deserves to be a T0 in my opinion. So we're basically going to be saying that if you are using Ovo with a healer, she's going to be T2, but if you're using her without a healer, she's going to be T0, and I know Rapid likes us indicator, so we're going to be a underscore for that one. The rest of the indoors all play fairly similarly, even if they do allow the same thing as Ovo. Obviously running, not running a healer, they aren't amping and they aren't dealing any base damage, so it's effectively the same as running a healer. So they're much less desirable than Ovo. Alright, Darren now. Now Darren, a shackle-free Darren, like my shackle-free Darren that I tested on, deals approximately 2.5 million by herself. Now, if we're assuming Shackle 0, I think we can still safely assume that she's going to be above 2 million, which puts her in T0 easily. Nox, on the other hand, is a bit different, because Nox by herself deals just shy of 1 million damage. However, she adds about 300k to someone like Zoya. So if you have 3 sinners that deal approximately Zoya's damage, then that adds about 900k base damage to, base amplification damage to Nox, which puts it about the 1.9 ish area. And if she's shackle free, I think we can safely put her at the above 2 million. So I think what we're going to be saying is that she's going to be 0.5. This is without shackle free, and then T1 at T0 shackle free. Yes, thank you, Zoya. Now, Zoya is a bit different because Zoya, now the thing about Zoya here, and as Rabbit has this labeled out, we confirmed, or basically we talked about that Darren is about like a 2.5 million at shackle free. For reference, a shackle free basically max Zoya like 9099 deals like 1.5 million, and Darren is 2.5 at shackle free. There's a 1 million difference, and I don't think it's reasonable to put these in the same tier. According to this, I've said that she's basically going to be T1, and I fully support that. I think Zoya is basically the baseline for what should be considered like really good in ToA. So we're definitely going to update that. I don't know how much damage her she does without her shackle free, but I think we can still safely put her around the T1.5, maybe even to tier 2. No, I think tier 1.5 is fine for that. Corso, we have no idea what she's going to be dealing of damage. 1 million, I think... I actually think she's going to be dealing less because of how movement reliant she is, which makes it so that you can't animation cancel. Or you can animation cancel, of course, but you have a lot less moves to do it, which is an opportunity cost to consider. So I think because of that, I think she's going to be T3 because she also doesn't amp, as far as I know. She has electrocute, but electrocute doesn't really count. Dolly, I believe, is around the same level as Priscilla and Roleka. We actually haven't tested her, but I'm pretty sure that she does not deal equivalent to Zoya's damage at shackle free. So I'm going to put her at 1.5, which is going to be around the 1.25 million, which I do think sounds fairly reasonable. Now, Horo is interesting because Horo is kind of a Ovo case in that if Horo allows you to run without a healer, which I don't think she does, but if she did, she herself deals around the, I think, 300 to 400k, maybe 500k if she's using them like Grand Zero, like maybe 600k, but something around like 500,000 damage. And then adding on another DPS would sincerely boost her output here. But I don't have any proof of it, so we're just going to keep her at, I think, a tier 3. Mess, now Mess is interesting because Mess, I actually told Rapid that I wanted her to be like a T0 point, and I kept spamming him about it. After doing a bit more, testing and all that, like my Mess deals about like 1.1 million damage base. but my miss is obviously really heavily invested in. She adds about 150k to 2 units if they are dealing the damage that approximately a Shackle 3 ToA is, which puts her about like close to the 1.5 million, which puts her at effectively the same as Zoya. SMS is going to be hovering about the 1.4, maybe 1.3 if you have a less invested mass. I wouldn't fault anyone for putting her at tier 1.5 either, but I think tier 1 is fairly reasonable. 99, same argument as Horo basically. If she can allow you to run healerless, she becomes significantly better. If not, she's fairly bad. I'm not sure what her personal damage is, but I think tier 2 is fine. Maybe tier 3 is actually more accurate. I think she deals more damage than Horo. I think she does. Bakasi deals about 1 million, no questions asked, nothing else really to contribute there, so that's going to be a tier 2 pretty safely. You can make the argument that she's a magic damage dealing unit that can actually tank. However, given that you're probably going to be running Darren no matter what, I don't think that's really something you should be considering or valuing too highly. If you do want to go for a full magic team setup, you can possibly run her, put her at tier 1.5. I don't know, tier 2, tier 1.5, I think it's about the same for her. I'm going to put her at tier 2 here for her 1 million contribution. Wendy, we don't know, but I don't think, yeah, I'm fairly certain she deals jack shit damage. She's pretty reliant on having multiple mobs on the field, and other than that, her ultimate is not doing a whole lot. So I don't think she's going to be dealing that much damage. I could be wrong on that one though. Che is definitely overrated here. Che has jack shit personal damage, but he has pretty good amp. Now, even if you want to consider Che's amp at about 250k, which is also about the same damage that he would deal himself if he's like properly invested in, you can probably put in at a 1 million. If you want to say that, the universal amp should add a bit to his rating, because he can also be used alongside magic units, instead of something like Bakasi without actually losing any of his amplification, I think that's a fair argument, and I would put him at tier 1.5. The immensely fast core break I think isn't super important. It was kind of nice for the last ToA, however, you could just run the different timeline, which is the delayed core break, or you could run, of course, Enfer. But yeah, I don't think it was that impactful. I think tier 1.5 is fair. Hella and Pepper obviously aren't that great, so I think it's fine to have them at tier 3. Alright, let's look at Bai Yi. So Bai Yi, I didn't actually fully test because she's a pain in the ass to test, but I think it's fairly safe to say that she competes rather heavily with Zoya. I believe they're around the same level of damage. Bai Yi might be slightly higher. No, I think it's actually pretty close to being the same. Whether or not she falls off as hard without the Shackle 3, I'm not sure. I think this is the safe call, tier 1.5 and tier 1. Crash at Shackle 4 definitely is not tier 0.5. Crash by herself deals about just shy of 1 million damage. Actually, I think around 800k would be more accurate to say. And she adds about, let's say, I think it's 120k with her Shackle 4 stacks, which if we have 3 of them, we're going to be looking at around a 1.25 contribution. Yep. Which would put around the tier 1.5, which is Shackle 5, or Shackle 4. Shackle 4, and I don't know. Without that, she's actually sub 1 million. So we're going to probably be putting her at tier 3 there, unfortunately. Yeah, I may be wrong on her tier, on her personal damage, but I'm pretty sure it's sub 1 million. You then had Serpent. Serpent without the Shackle 3 Plus deals just over 1 million, which puts her at tier 2. I don't know why she's rated this highly though, even with Shackle 3 Plus. A Shackle 4 Serpent with Embrace and Decent, I think it was, Spin RNG, deals about 1.3 million. You can put her at either, I would say, tier 1.5 or tier 1, depending on luck. I guess if we're going to take upper bound, we might as well do tier 1. Yeah, sure. But if we take upper bound, we'll take tier 1. Yeah. Iron, I haven't tested at all. I'm not sure. I definitely don't think she's doing... Oh, she has pen in her kit. If I say that adds about like 100k, I think tier 2 is safer for her. I don't know. This is one is a hard one to judge. Tier 1.5. Tier 1.5 would I said as how much? Yeah, 1.25 million. Could she reach that with her amplification? I think because Darren is Darren. We could keep it. I don't know. That one's sketchy for sure. Lynn deals really bad damage herself. It's like sub 500,000, I think, or like around 500,000. But she adds quite a bit of damage if she's paired with something like Darren, which makes her really hard to assess. Generally speaking, I think tier 2 is probably fine. She deals around the 1 million overall. Sounds about right. McQueen adds about the... I think it's 1.5 as well. If you use her slightly differently than you would normally use her in, for instance, something like BFL. McQueen in ToA should typically, I think, run something like Justice and then just spam her exclusive Crown Brand to keep Justice permanently up, which adds about 100k to every other sinner on the field, at least if they're doing damage similar to ToA, which I think adds about a 300k to her damage. And she herself, if she copies something like a really strong mess, she adds about 700k herself. No, I think tier 2 is fine. I think that's fairly decent. I'm just going to skip most of the bleed because they are highly dependent on Drea when she comes out. We can reassess when that happens if I make an in-depth Drea video. Tetra is another really hard to assess sinner because I haven't actually tested her, but I'm fairly certain that she has way more damage than Lynn, and of course she adds in crit as an amp. Now how much that actually translates into is pretty hard to say, but I think a tier 1.5 is sufficient, given that I'm pretty sure we are going to be looking at a 1.25. If I assume that Tetra by herself deals about slightly less than 1 million. Oh, actually. Nah, I don't know. I'm actually unsure, but I think tier 1.5 is fair. Gigapigeon definitely should not be tier 2. Tier 1.5, I think she should be tier 2, if not tier 3. I think because of Darren, we can actually... Oh, how much does Darren really give to her by her through her amp? That's a hard one, actually. I think tier 2. Yeah, I think tier 2 still. Because she's going to have terrible personal damage. Yeah. Labyrinth is tier 3. Doesn't deal really any damage herself. Langley without the Shackle 0 is definitely going to be tier 3, even my 9999. Shackle 1 Langley deals just shy of 1 million damage base wise. However, when she actually gets to Shackle 1, her own just shy of 1 million damage needs to be added on to her 150k contribution to basically everyone else, which I think puts her in around the let's see, yeah, I think that actually does put her up to tier 1, I would say. It's quite a jump. She deals about 900k herself, and she adds about 150k to everyone else. So you have 3 of those. You have 450k. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be just shy of 1.5. Yeah, okay, she can be either tier 1 or tier 1.5, the Langley here. I think both are fine. As ratings, depends on what Rapid feels is more correct. Oak is definitely not tier 1.5. Even a fully shackled Oak that I tested usually will deal about sub 1 million. Literally. It's pretty sad how bad she is in ToA, but she's of course pretty good in BFL, and she's going to be really good when the new pit hits. Summer, I haven't tested a lackluster Summer, basically one without any shackles, but I think it's not looking too pretty. I think she's going to be hovering around the 1.25, maybe slightly over 1 million. I'm actually not sure, but it's not too great. I think it's around the 1 million. At Shackle 4, I think tier 1 is completely reasonable. I think she's going to be hitting around the 1.5. Well, I think she might need Shackle 5 for that. I'm gonna say tier 1.5 here, I think, and that's just to be safe. It's just to be safe. A bit more testing, I think, is needed on the summer. Priscilla does around 1.25, which puts her nicely in the 1.5 category. Same thing as Rebecca. Wolverine does around just over 1 million himself, and adds about 150k to someone that has Soya's damage, which puts him at about a 1, basically, just a straight 1. EMP does sub 1 million and doesn't do really anything else except for that. And I think Flora should be in the same tier as Priscilla and Rebecca. Her personal damage is slightly lesser, but she can animation cancel to get like a huge amount of damage. I mean, that makes up the difference. Alright, Irene. Now, Irene is actually pretty bad without the, what's it called? Shackle free. Her personal damage at Shackle 0 even, I think. I only tested the Shackle 1 Irene, who was still under 1 million. However, you need to consider with Irene that she lets you stack your last stand faster, which does give a slight damage increase. However, it's typically not enough to really put her at a higher, I should say, rating. When she gets to Shackle free, I tested how much damage she would add to something like Alluvia at Shackle free, and about a 12% damage increase, which ended up being about a 120 contribution, times that by 3, and you're looking at something very similar to Lang Lee's damage potential. If you add in another one for 15%, I think you can safely put her at T1, similar to Lang Lee. Eddie is highly shackle dependent. Actually, I should add Shackle free here. Eddie is highly shackle dependent. At Shackle 0, she is really nothing special. Actually quite mediocre. She's very similar to something like Priscilla's damage here, which would be tier 2 or 1.5 or something, yeah. However, if she gets her Shackle 1, I think you can safely put her up 1 tier. It actually adds quite a bit. And lastly, if you have a Shackle 3, I think she goes to tier 0.5 rather confidently. There's a lot of advantages of having this Shackle 3, and I think it was hard to measure the Shackle 4 contribution actually, because if you're pairing her with something like an Irene, you probably want Irene to pick it up, because Irene does all of her damage in like the last, the concentrated amount of time. So it depends on who picks up the orb and how much the Shackle 4 is contributing. Yeah, I don't know. It could be tier 0 or tier 0.5. I think tier 0.5 is the conservative number or tier, but I wouldn't blame Rapid for going tier 0 here. Yeah. But yeah, the really important thing about this Shackle 3 is that it allows her to maintain the exclusive crime brand amplification for herself way more easily. Now, the test that I did on Eddie here, none of my friends had an exclusive crime brand level 3 Eddie, so a lot of the estimates I have are slightly lower, which is also why I'm feeling that you can definitely put her at tier 0 here. She is definitely the strongest Arcane base unit. If you just want one unit that deals a lot of damage for your ampers to get the most of the value, Eddie is your girl usually. Which then brings us nicely into Raven, because Raven synergizes incredibly well with Eddie in ToA. Raven is a short burst amp, and Eddie usually does her damage in short bursts. So they coincide nicely. Now, we don't know Raven's damage. We didn't have her when we had ToA. However, I think her damage output, her personal damage output, is going to be looking quite similar to something like Irene. We're going to be looking at like 0.9 to 1.1 maybe. Sorry. Personal damage at Shackle 0. We're probably looking at something like it depends on the units around her, right? Like which units is she supporting in order for how much are they amping. I think conservatively, I'm going to say it's going to be like 200k damage increase per, so let's time that by 3. 600k. I think we can safely put her at a 1.5 million contribution, like that's conservatively put, which would put her at a T1. And I think if you do have the Shackle 3, I think that easily goes to tier 0.5, if not even tier 0. Shackle 3 obviously doesn't matter. It's probably the worst S-rank Shackle 1 that I've seen It literally does nothing unless you have shackle free. So yeah. T1 if shackle 0, and T0.5 if shackle free. I think is fair. Stargazer, I think, deals just over 1 million by herself, so it's like tier 2, and I think you can safely put her at tier 1.5 if you have shackle 2+. Oh, this is still going to be a really long video. Hekate, a fully built Hekate, like I'm talking 9999. Hekate with Embrace deals about 950k. And I know a Hekate with approximately level 7 passive 2 deal amps about 200k to something like a Luvia. Times that by 3, you're pretty much looking at a 1.5 million-ish contribution. So that actually means that she should probably stay at T1. Now, most people will probably not have a 9999 Hekate or whatever. And probably they don't want her to be running Embrace. So you can probably reduce her rating down to about tier 2. If you don't have the additional person damage. Oh, yeah, tier 2 I think is fine. If you don't have a well-invested Hekate. Ignis deals about 750k, and that's kind of it. Which was really disappointing when I tested that. So that's going to be a solid tier 3. Lua Ray is about a 1.22. Which puts it around the level of something like Priscilla and Roleka. Obviously, you can emission cancel that to go in higher. Oliver, I haven't tested by himself, but I know that a well-invested Oliver deals just shy of about like 1 million. And how much he amps is the problem. I'm not completely sure, but I think we can safely put him at tier 1.5. Victoria, I'm actually not sure how much he deals. I think tier 2 sounds sufficient. She only brings damage, and I think she would probably be dealing around the 1 million damage output. Joanne deals about 700k by herself. I think 750, maybe, or 800k was it? By herself, but then adds on like 300k to something like a Luvia. Like her amp is really, really strong. Times that by 3, you have about a 900k contribution there, and you're looking at a well above tier 1 unit here. Yeah. Joanne really strong. Of course, she does have the problem of interacting with Hekate in a kind of poor manner. Their amps do not like each other. So if you're going to be running the Raven, you're probably going to be picking either Hekate or the Joanne. Most people, I think, will probably go for the Hekate. But yeah, I mean, you could also run all 3. I'm not sure just how much of the diminishing return there is on them, but just something to consider. And Kelvin, I don't know, she does jack shit, basically. But you should consider, for Kelvin's case, that she does have a buttload of CC, which may or may not allow you to run healerless. If it does, obviously she becomes way better, but no one has proved that it did. Now, Infra, I didn't actually fully test about like how much damage she adds. I think I did a base test, which was like she adds in like I think 750k to something like a Priscilla, which isn't bad by any means, but C0 should definitely be if you're running her healerless. If you're not doing that, I think you can probably put her at about a tier 1.5, 0.5, tier 1 actually, I think. I don't think a Shackle 0 Infer adds over 1.5 million damage without allowing you to run healerless. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's tier 1 without the healerless. I think Hamel... See, Hamel, now we're getting to the healers, which are going to be slightly harder to assess, right? Because they obviously do not care about the damage contribution they are doing. And Hamel does actually amp, but she also just does a great job at healing the team. I think Hamel is going to be staying at tier 0 just because of how strong her healing is. That allows you to go full on damage and not really worry about any sort of defensive crumber setups or anything like that. And I think, I mean, see, this is where Anne, Ariel, and Macchiato are going to be really interesting to talk about, because they all do the same thing, which is they keep your team alive and do nothing else other than that, which in the current meta isn't super great. Now, I know a lot of people love Ariel because how well she does keep your team alive. However, the lack of any amplification or any other sort of thing, I think I'm going to have to like demote her down to like all the way down to like T1.5. And I know people don't like her healing, but as far as I've seen, like she heals just fine. She keeps her team alive, doesn't do anything other than that. So I think that deserves some praise. Macchiato tier 2 as well. I think that's completely fine. Yeah, moving on to something like Chameleon. Chameleon adds about 600k to something like Zoya. Times that by 3. You have like 1.8, and she also deals about like 200k herself. I should mention though, she adds 600k to other sinners with Soul Rift. But she'll usually be running that anyway, so I think that's fine to consider. So I think a tier 0 is well warranted. Dudu has a huge problem. Alright, Dudu has a huge problem. I think Dudu is pretty underrated for Tail of Ashes, because she doesn't share the same problem that Ariel and Macchiato does, which is all they do is heal your team. Dudu actually does that pretty badly. However, she amps. And her amp isn't actually like terrible, it's actually fairly decent. She's definitely contributing more damage to something like Ariel or Macchiato. Now the problem is that if I put her at tier 1 or tier 1.5, I think people are going to misinterpret that as thinking that she is a good healer and she will keep your entire team alive. As that is not fully the case. So I think I'm going to put her at tier 1.5 together with Ariel. I'm going to up Ariel, I think, to tier 1. Just so people... because I think most people who are going to look at this are going to think of healer like purely in terms of healer. So I think we're gonna do this then, because I think Anne definitely heals better than Macchiato does. Yeah, and Fox. So Fox, even if it's excluded Crownbrand, he does add quite a bit of damage. Something like a Darren. We're looking at about a 1.5 million base damage, like just Darren through his excluded Crownbrand. You then have about a 200k ish damage to everyone else from his Shackle Free, which all puts him in about a tier 1.5 actually. But you can of course value the stun skip that he can do, which, well, you know what, I'll toast to that. Let's put him at tier 1. Lisa, I think, is just tier 3 no matter what you do, no matter how you slice it, even extra Scramble 1. If you want to say that she adds in 300k damage, her own damage is going to be like 100k, 200k, maybe if you're really generous. Like she's going to be 100k. I don't know what I'm talking about. Even if you want to say she adds in 300k to other sinners, she's still only going to be base contributing like around the 900k to 1 million. So yeah, tier 3. And Macchiato does. Just keep your team alive, so tier 2. I guess we'll put a tier 2, but a tier 1.5 with Luvia. And there you go. Oh, I should probably add in this one. I went ahead and made a denominator for it. Okay, there you go. And that's going to be all of the Tides of Ashes. Oh, I think this video was way too long, and I don't know if anyone actually made it through all the way, but yeah, I guess thanks for watching, and let me know if you want me to go through some of the other categories here. If you want to hear me ramble on for another half an hour, or whatever the hell this one took. Alright, that's going to be it though. That's going to be all of my opinion, at least, for how the Tides of Ashes tier list should look like. Alright, yeah. That's gonna be it then, yeah. Alright, thanks for watching, guys.